Good morning, everyone. I'm Liz Krueger, State Senator. Welcome to the last of my senior roundtables for boomers and seniors. We're calling this one Aging in Place, Living Well in the Community. I want to welcome all our participants to have participated with us all season. As always, we have closed captioning for today's event. As a viewer, you have to activate the closed captioning to view the text on your device. If you're in Zoom, click on Live Transcript in the meeting controls to start viewing closed captioning. And if you're on Facebook Live, you'll see a setting button on the bottom right-hand corner of the video. Click Closed Caption CC to start viewing closed captioning. And in case you're wondering whether I really live here in Manhattan, I'm right next to a construction site, so you're going to hear a lot of noise this morning. Sorry, not much I can do about that. This forum is being recorded, and everyone who RSVP'd will receive an email with links to the event video and all of the resources that are going to be posted in the chat within a few days, along with the presenters' PowerPoints. Before we go to the program, a COVID update. In New York City, our COVID-19 alert level is now high or orange as of May 17th. What this means for the city is that coronavirus case and hospitalization rates are going up, which puts substantial pressure on our healthcare systems. What this means for you is that it is especially important to take extra precautions. This is the time to get any COVID-19 vaccinations or booster shots that will bring you up to date. Staying up to date with COVID-19 vaccinations is necessary to be fully protected from severe illness. And trust me, you want the lesser version of this disease if you're going to get it, not the severe version. Wear a high quality or double mask in public indoor settings. Hold social gatherings outside. Maintain air ventilation inside. Avoid large crowds. Get tested if you have symptoms, if you're exposed, and before and after travel and gatherings. Stay home if you contract COVID-19 and speak with your doctor about eligibility for different treatments. And now we're going to move on to today's event. One of today's participants submitted a great question when she RSVP'd. She wrote, "When does one stop living one's life and start aging?" My answer is that we start aging from the moment we're born, and we never stop living our lives until we die. But in order to ensure that we continue to live well as we age, we need to make sure we have the supports that we need in place. In New York City, there are more people over age 65 than younger than age 14. We have to start looking at these demographic shifts as opportunities to be creative rather than simply as a problem to be solved. We also have to think differently about aging and being older. Our first speaker today is Andrea Cianfrani, the Deputy Executive Director of LiveOn New York, who will talk about the Reframing Aging initiative in New York City. Following, we will hear from Elana Kieffer, Acting Director of the Center for Healthy Aging at the New York Academy of Medicine. Then Mario Rubano, Policy Associate at the Center for Healthy Aging, and then Alden Prouty, who is a member of Carnegie Hill Village. Elana and Mario will present on the New York Academy of Medicine's initiative to develop and support age-friendly neighborhood organizations, and Alden will share information about the work she is doing in her community. Our final speaker will be Councilmember Crystal Hudson, the chair of the Aging Committee in the New York City Council and a fierce advocate for older New Yorkers. Just to remind you before we start, we will have a Q&A session after the presentation, and you can also submit additional questions through the Q&A functions on Zoom and Facebook. And so now it is a pleasure for me to introduce Andrea Cianfrani. Good morning, Andrea.
Good morning, Senator Krueger. Thank you so much for having us here. A really good morning to everybody on this town hall. It's really exciting to be here with so many strong voices and advocates working to make New York a stronger and better place for us all as we age. I really want to thank you and your staff, your steadfast support and advocacy day in and day out for these issues is so valued and so appreciated, and we really look forward to continuing to work with you year after year on these issues. So we're really excited to be here today with you all. I also really want to acknowledge that I know I'm in this very powerful Zoom room with hundreds of people who have been advocates for equity and aging issues for decades. So thank you for being here to hear about the Reframing Aging Initiative. And thank you for all you've done and continue to do to make New York a better place for all of us as we age. So,
Andre, if I could just interrupt you for a minute. You have, I think there's something on your microphone. Maybe if you have some papers on your computer.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Is that better?
That's much better. Thank you.
Okay. Are we good?
Yep.
Okay.
You.
I am going to start by sharing my screen and to give you a little more information about what we're going to talk about today. So if you just give me a moment. Here we go. We should all give me one moment. Okay, are we good?
Yep.
Great. Well, again, I wanted to introduce the Reframing Aging Initiative, and I'm really excited to talk about that today. The Reframing Aging Initiative is a nationwide long-term, and I will stress long-term, and I'll get to that in a moment. It's a grant-funded social change initiative to design to improve or reframe the way the public understands aging and what aging means and what we need as a community as we all age. It also is really focused on, I love that question, Senator Krueger, that one of the people today submitted, talking about what it means to age and really important about the contributions we continue to make as we age. And again, yes, we are all aging and we start aging at birth. So that is exactly what this initiative embraces and talks about. So the Reframing Aging Initiative is ultimately kind of provides communications tools and a framework to help change and dismantle the public's perception of ageism. I'll get into kind of some of the mechanics of that shortly, but really what we're trying to do is help change that perception so that we can create new policies to support us all in a better way. And we can make aging look different and support us for what we need. I really do want to underscore that this initiative is generational work. It's long-term. It's something that LiveOn and the Reframing Aging Initiative nationwide is committed to. It's not something that we can do overnight, and it's not something we can do by ourselves. It's something we can do as a community, and that's really why we're excited to talk here today. This initiative is also based in research, and so it's really shown to work. And so that's what the tools that have been developed, a lot of communications tools and language is working. And as we continue to build on that with more voices, we're really excited to see where we can head together as a state and as a world to dismantle ageism. So I'm going to start with ageism. So I know everyone has seen this, has experienced this, and knows this. And we know that ageism harms us all. It's defined here as a discrimination based on negative assumptions by age. And so many of you have seen these examples that are on the slide. You know, the challenge is that, you know, ageism and repeated language like this that's accepted, you know, continues to have a cause and effect cycle that just lingers on. So what we really need to do and what we have learned from the Reframing Aging Initiative is how we can start attacking, you know, these using language that attacks these biases that causes ageism. So where does this start? I'll start with implicit bias. And again, you'll all get these slides and there's a lot of tools at the end that kind of boils this all down to makes this much easier to use. But I think it's really important to explain the background on where we're headed. So Frameworks Institute, which did a lot of the research behind you know, the societal causes of ageism and what perpetuates it, really identified implicit bias as kind of a key place to start. So implicit biases are attitudes and stereotypes that we might not be aware of, that we all have. We have subconscious negative judgments about many things in our lives that we see, and one of those is age. What the research has shown is that if we understand that we all have biases, both in ourselves and others in the community around us, and kind of recognize those, it makes us less likely to just use judgments and to treat people differently based on characteristics. So that's really where reframing starts, is recognizing implicit bias, and then knowing that if we recognize it, we can do things to kind of challenge that and to challenge thinking both in ourselves and those around us. The next thing I'm going to talk about is what is called in this initiative, the swamp of public thinking. And I think, we all know about swamps, right? Instead of fishbowls, our brains are more like swamps. Our brains have rich cognitive ecosystems with lots of flowers, fauna, and just like a real swamp, it's filled with very nice things and then sometimes dangerous things like alligators, mosquitoes, and all of those things. Our minds over time are filled with these models, pre-existing expectations, and some of those can be harmful for what we as communities look and see in ourselves and in others. So as communicators, which all of you are, you're here on this town hall, you are interested and advocating for what is needed in your community. You've been doing this for decades. As communicators, you are the first line to really change what people are thinking and saying, which will ultimately change the policies of what happens around us. So you are so key to this initiative, and it's so incredibly exciting to have you all here today because you've been doing work to counter all of these things in the past. So what we're going to talk about next is how we can kind of use communication tools that change the way people think about aging, change that swamp. That swamp is there, but maybe kind of get in there and change the way that people use language. So, and again, I know I'm going through these quickly. You'll get these slides and we will give you a lot of tools to use in a much quicker way in your daily work. But what the reframing aging really looks at is first is the challenges. What is the swamp of aging? What do people think about aging in their brains? We're going back to those biases. We're going back to those kind of things that we inherently think. And then we need to figure out where those come from. Because of time, I'm not going to go through each of these models, but I do want to highlight a couple. So the first one that is really something that LiveOn's embraced and many of our partners have embraced, and Senator, you say it so well, it's this us versus them mentality. We see it a lot that older people are a group of people over there that don't include many of us. And that is really when LiveOn has really started to change the way that we advocate and we talk about aging. We do a lot of advocacy around funding for services. So we're not talking about funding for services for a group of people. We're talking about services for all of us as a New York, all of us as a community, because we're all aging. This is building a society for us all that supports us all as we age and has what we need to age well as New Yorkers. So that's one of the key things that in communication, and again, at the end, I'll show you kind of some language to use. And it's the us versus them mentality that's really key to change, because when we look at something as a collective challenge to tackle together, more people get involved, more people have something to work towards, and we do it together and not just for maybe somebody else. So that's really a really important key with the language we use. I think another part of reframing that has been really important to highlight is individualism. A lot of times when we talk about having what we need later in our life cycle, we talk about, well, if that person just did something differently, they could have been better. Or if they just planned better to have what they needed, then they would have been fine. It's kind of on them. There's nothing on us as a community or as a society. So the Reframing Aging initiative really challenges that level of thinking. That is not what we as a community believe. And if we share that responsibility in our public policy, in our work, then it really changes and shifts the decisions we make as a community on what we value and what we invest in. So it's really another key point of looking at aging and looking at our life courses as something as a shared community value, and not just something that's left up to the individual to deal with on their own. So that's another key kind of shift in thinking. And again, I'm highlighting these challenges because these are the challenges that we need to tackle with everyone out there that might have these implicit biases, including ourselves. So those are just two of the key challenges that I wanted to highlight today. The last one I will highlight before I move on is solutions. A lot of the reframing language work is focused on really giving a solution. Sometimes, especially in aging, issues and challenges are presented with no solution in sight. So that makes it very hard for people to want to get behind it because, well, if there's no solution to that, then why even bother? So really, we've changed the language around using, disastrous terms. The tsunami's coming, there's nothing we can do about it. Those types of terms to really talk about aging in a different way. Maybe there are many challenges that come with us and with our communities as we age, but there are solutions and things we can do together to solve those or to address those. So again, there's nuanced language, and that language is all designed to be used by people over and over, modeling language that when we use that has been proven to change other people's ways of thinking about aging. So those are just a few of the challenges that the research has shown is what is happening to perpetuate aging. And again, reframing really is focused on the opportunities in front of us. Again, we believe, and I know all of you on this call believe, and our incredible advocates, Senator and Council Member Hudson, have shown that we believe there's opportunities to create change. There's opportunities to dismantle ageism, to create policies that work for us all, to create a better New York for all of us as we age. And that's what we're focused on. So we really are changing this language to say, yes, there's challenges, but there are solutions. And when we look at that as a community versus something just for those people over there, and it's collective responsibility, then we can work together to solve them. And again, I underscore that this is not an overnight fix. You all know that. You've all been advocating for many issues for many years. This is a generational change that will take a lot of time and a lot of effort, and we are all invested in that, and we're really excited to share that with you. I'm going to skip over this slide, which you'll get in the final. So this is the final part. Again, I know I just kind of went through quite a bit. Usually we do these trainings and there's much more background information. So we'll be happy to send you these slides. But I think if there's anything to take from today around reframing, it's really this slide kind of shows the key areas. So first of all, our words matter. This Reframing Aging initiative is really built upon communication tools and language to change the public's perception and to really attack those implicit biases that people have. So we have a lot of tools on our website. We will send these to participants, or the participants will receive them. But really, there's some really simple kind of, this is maybe what you hear, or and what words you might have used in the past, such as tidal waves, tsunami, kind of catastrophic terms around aging that can't be fixed. And I'll use the example from the sheet, is to try to use, words like, there's changing demographics. We're aging quicker. The senator, you talked about the number of older adults there'll be, in the generational shift. So talking about those is, it's reality. It's what's happening, but it's not catastrophic. And there are solutions and things we can work to collectively to address them. And so that's the first is, you here on this call, again, key advocates out in the community. it's both a language that you choose to use, but it's also listening for language that might have those implicit biases in them and correcting people or calling them out, or just reacting in a way that uses kind of this forward-thinking language. The second, part is really checking if your work and your community use swampy language, and really, again, calling that out and advocating in a way that helps change the public perception. And then finally, the language around inclusivity. I know I talked about this a lot, but really the focus on this is us and we. This is not them, a group of people over there that aren't seen. This is all of us as we age as New Yorkers. And so, again, I know I covered a lot and I think my time is up, but I really would want to thank you all for the advocacy and for building New York over decades. We are in this for the long haul, and we are really committed to the work. We join all of our advocates, our government partners, the other speakers on this call to really focus on a change in New York that works for us all as we age. And with that, I will pass it back and just thank you again for your time.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Really appreciate that. And now we're going to hear from Elana Kieffer, Mario Rubano, and Alden Prouty.
Thank you
Good
so
morning,
much,
everyone.
Senator. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. And unlike the senator, what you might hear in my background are birds, which is, I think, a much more pleasant noise. So I hope that you enjoy it. So thank you all so much for having us today. As the senator said, my name is Elana Kieffer. I'm the acting director at the Center for Healthy Aging at the New York Academy of Medicine, and I'm joined by my colleague Mario Rubano. And you can see here, the New York Academy of Medicine, otherwise known as NIAM, this year we're celebrating our 175th anniversary, speaking of aging. And some of you may have been in our building. We're located right in East Harlem, very close to the senator's district. And we work, you can go to the next slide, please. We work on all issues related to health equity, and we see our vision is that everyone has the opportunity to live a healthy life, and we try to get to that by driving progress towards improved health through attaining that health equity. We do this through many different ways. We have a world-class medical history library. We have a fellows program made up of over 2,000 physicians, social workers, public health professionals, and the like, who have devoted their careers to pursuing health equity. And we also have a number of different research, evaluation, and policy programs. You can go to the next slide, including the Center for Healthy Aging. So at our center, you can see here that we work to improve the health and well-being of both current and future aging populations. As Andrea said, all of us in the kind of aging services world are very aware and working on the growth and the incredible opportunities as people continue to age longer and healthier. And all of us, myself included, have a lot to learn in terms of the vocabulary that we use when we talk about these shifts and changes. And you can see here that we focus on many different aspects of aging and healthy aging. We work on research related to, of course, the socialization. Social isolation has been such an important and critical topic, particularly in the last 2+ years. Of course, the physical well-being of older adults, the financial security is a major and ongoing challenge. And then, as Andrea had just mentioned, there's a lot that has to do with societal perceptions of older people, of aging. And so we work to kind of work on those and on improving those perceptions. Of course, the abilities and activities of the older population, and working with providers in New York City, in New York State, and across the country to ensure that they're providing the best care that they can, and that people are able to access that type of care. We do this through many different ways, and we're just going to touch today actually on the first one, which is around convening. So Mario is going to go into detail about one of the programs that we have, which is called our Age-Friendly Neighborhood Organization Convening. We really believe there's so much good work being done in New York City directly from older adults who know firsthand and on the ground how to ensure that their neighborhoods and that this wonderful city that we live in can be the best it can be for older adults and for all of us. And so all we are doing is bringing them together in the same room, whether it's a physical room or a Zoom room, to share ideas, to troubleshoot challenges, and to work together to really make that change. So with that, I will turn it over to Mario.
All right. Thank you, Elana. Again, my name is Mario Rubano. I'm a policy associate here at the New York Academy of Medicine's Center for Healthy Aging. And this morning, I'll be sharing a very brief overview of this project that we at the Center for Healthy Aging implemented in 2020 and 2021, the Age-Friendly Neighborhood Organization Convenings. Just to provide some quick context, this Age-Friendly Neighborhoods model, it's an effort that NIAM has been engaged with dating back to 2007, when together with the New York City Office of the Mayor and Speaker of New York City Council, we launched the Age-Friendly New York City Council. So this involved an extensive assessment of older New Yorkers to get a clearer sense of how well the city was meeting the needs of older adults across 8 domains, including transportation, social inclusion, housing, and many more. And this resulted in New York City being designated the first city in the world to be an age-friendly city. And since then, we've remained a real advocate for this model and have published a number of reports, guides, and toolkits to help promote these values and really to get this concept into the minds and into the hands of older adults and to individuals and organizations that are working in this space. But of course, today's theme of community living included some coverage just a moment ago on reframing aging. And so, as mentioned, it's an initiative that builds so constructively on this early work and helps to drive this work forward by further refining the ways that we discuss it. It's such a critical piece. And when we were invited to join the roundtable to speak about our age-friendly work, it made sense for us to kind of weave this work into reframing aging and to demonstrate the ways that these linguistic changes can really, how they can look in practice on the ground. So we wanted to provide a demonstration of how reframing aging can change how we discuss this. And so the example that we were moving forward with was building momentum. That was on the final slide of Andrea's presentation. Building momentum as a metaphor means just ways to express that aging is a dynamic process that leads to new abilities, new knowledge that we can share with our communities. And the Age-Friendly Neighborhood Convenings did just that. So at the onset of the pandemic, we were approached by New York Health Foundation, and in our second year, the New York Community Trust, with the task of bringing together this wide range of age-friendly neighborhood organizations that exist all across the city, and to bring them into a supportive network at a time when everyone, both individual and organization, we were all fragmented and isolated and trying our hardest to kind of meet the needs of community members against seemingly impossible odds. So in the 2 6-month cycles, NIAM initiated a series of virtual convenings of over 30 different age-friendly neighborhood leaders and aging service providers. You can see here just a selection of some of these organizations who joined us. Shout out to Andrea, LiveOn New York. They were a steadfast member. So over the course of each cycle, these convenings provided an opportunity for peer networking, an exchange of innovative practices that would inform their ability to meet the needs of their community members. So you can see here an image that has become quite familiar to all of us by now. Our convenings occurred via Zoom, no surprise, due to the need to socially isolate. And each of these monthly calls had a general theme or topic. It was important to build upon the grassroots strengths that many of these organizations have. So we used our initial sessions to assess what the members viewed as the most critical topic areas to dive into. A key aspect of these convenings was being able to engage closely with elected officials. As you can see in this screenshot, we were joined by members of the Queensborough President's Office. And we were fortunate enough to also be joined by then Borough President Eric Adams and then Borough President Gail Brewer as well. So for each theme, we worked to bring in experts from each content area who could present to the convening members, to engage in Q&As, and to educate. And we looked into food access, health information, especially up-to-date, accurate COVID information, public health information, affordable senior housing, strategies to use on social media to expand the reach of your age-friendly organization so you can gain more members and bring your services to more individuals in your community. In addition, we were able to administer $2,500 to $3,000 grants over both cycles to multiple age-friendly neighborhood groups that are working on a variety of different projects to meet the needs of their community members. And this was another way for us, for the ways in which we wanted to support the grassroots nature of these organizations. These leaders, they're often older adults who have a much keener understanding of the needs of their neighborhoods than we do, for example. So if we get the resources into their hands, they know how best to use them. So we included a handful of organizations here in this presentation to give you an idea of what they did with that, how they built their own momentum. So here is Harlem Advocates for Seniors. They did a lot of work in technology, digital equity, so they were able to purchase subscriptions for Wi-Fi, because despite any technology devices you might have, they're arguably useless if you don't have a secure, steady connection to the internet. So they were able to establish that for 2 of their locations. Here we have Life Force in later years. They were able to use their funds to expand the reach of their newsletter. They're reaching over 225 people at this point. You can see in these snapshots that it's a very interactive process. There's members of the community sharing their voices, kind of elevating each other. And here's the Southbridge Fitness through the Addo Foundation. They're doing some really amazing work out in Brooklyn. Their grant funded the Move Better, Feel Better program, which was an intergenerational wellness program. So it brought together people of all different ages to exercise together, to go on field trips per se into the local business improvement district, the Myrtle Avenue Partnership, and learn where to buy fresh foods, healthy foods. So it was a kind of a multimodal health program that was very successful. And yeah, so just in the interest of time, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Thank you, Senator Krueger, for inviting us to share all this information. We want to make it clear that the Center for Healthy Aging is available as a resource for anyone on this call. If you want to learn more about this model or anything else that we've been working on, please feel free to reach out to us at these email addresses. We also encourage you to plug into our Twitter page so you can get, stay connected to the goings on of the center. And with that, I'd like to pass it over to Alden from Carnegie Hill Village, and she's going to share kind of an inside perspective on the age-friendly neighborhood organizations model.
Good morning. I'm Alden, and I'm going to talk about Carnegie Hill Village, which is part of a nationwide movement to enable people as they age to stay in their communities and age in place. There are now over 400 of them in the United States. We were inspired by Beacon Hill Village in Boston, which was established in 1999 and has been up and running since 2002. We began as a small group of volunteers in 2015, and we've been up and running since 2017 for 5 years. We have about 150 members who pay annual dues of $100 a year. We run the organization ourselves without a paid staff or paid help. There's a lot of talent and everybody pitches in. And we also work very closely with local neighborhood organizations like Carnegie Hill Neighbors and health advocates for older people, local churches and synagogues, and search and care. So we're working within an enriched environment. In 2015 and 16, we developed a survey to find out what people really wanted. And Carnegie Hill Neighbors kindly let us put the survey in their quarterly magazine, and we sent out about 13,000. We got a very good response. And what we found out was that people were looking for social connections and contact, not help so much to walk to the doctor or for shopping or walking the dog, although that help comes when it's needed through the friendships that have been formed. Our boundaries originally were the historic district of Carnegie Hill, which runs from 86th to 98th. 97th and 98th go from 5th to Madison, but the rest went over to 3rd Avenue. Then this spring, we expanded to 2nd Avenue. And finally, as of yesterday, we are now all the way over to York and East End Avenue. So we go from essentially 98th to 79th, and it's a big area, but people, and many little neighborhoods within the area, but people form their own units and spread out and get to know each other. We offer a lot. We have local group tours to museums that have been in person, if we can, with COVID, or they're online, and we have museum docents. The talent that exists in this area is just wonderful. We have concerts, and then there are lots of groups that are small, that are formed by members, such as the history group, the men's discussion group, the short story group, TED Talks, knitting, walking groups twice a week, and a meditation, and it just, and knitting. I forgot the knitting, but that was one of the earliest ones. And they're just the social connections that have been formed. Now people run into each other on the street and really enjoy it. And then we have dinners at local restaurants. One of our favorites is Lexington Avenue Pizza up at 101st. And farther south. So it's been, it grows and it's organic, and we depend on the enthusiasm of our members. One thing I wanted to say is that we started a new initiative called Interesting Lives, because as we've gotten to know each other, there's so many people who have amazing backgrounds, things that they've done or the lives that they've led. So we're doing interviews and with each other, and as we identify people who would be interested. So that's a short view of Carnegie Hill Village, and it's a very positive, wonderful thing to belong to.
Thank you so much. That's great, Alden. I must admit,
You should join.
thank you. You know, you're in my district, and I'm not sure I knew half of the things that you were working on with the village. So that's fantastic. Thank you. And I want to thank all three of you for your speaking presentation. And I'm just double checking, is Council Member Crystal Hudson with us?
She is not with us yet.
Okay. So I'm going to, while we're waiting for Crystal, I'm going to answer, I guess, a couple of questions I saw come up in the chat before we get to Crystal. And we might start in on other questions if she's still not here. So one question that I saw was, how do I feel about the city's plan or proposal to move retirees from their current city employee health benefits as a retiree into a for-profit Medicare Advantage health coverage plan. And if you are a retired city employee, you know about this because you have recently, or I guess over the course of the last year, gotten lots of confusing notices from the city that you're being changed, then that you have an option not to be changed if you're willing to pay a supplement for your existing benefits, then a lawsuit, then holding off on implementing, then not charging you for continuing on your other benefits. And I actually am not 100% sure what the status is right now, but I will tell you that my husband is a retiree, and so we were getting all these materials and reading up as much as we could and listening to the different arguments. And we decided that he was not going to change his plan. He was going to stay with the original Medicare and the package that he was offered and guaranteed as a city employee for his lifetime, and that we were not going to change to the Medicare Advantage plan. And we also made the decision that if they start to charge for that, we are going to pay that rather than move into the Medicare Advantage plans, which have some real concerns. So I can't tell anyone else what to do other than to read as much as they can about what's going on. But I would urge you to be very careful before you change your plan. Double check that your doctors would be participating in the new plan, and understand that there may be additional costs and penalties for you if you change your plan. So be cautious before you do anything. And I see Council Member Crystal Hudson, so that was perfect timing for me to just cover that one question that popped up on chat. And now I would very excited that the councilwoman could make time for us to jump on today. I know she's in a very busy period with the city council, but Crystal's a new council member, is the chair of the New York City Council Aging Committee, and is, I think, really a perfect person to come and talk to us about being advocates in for our own lives and in our communities. Good morning, Crystal.
Good morning, Senator, and thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you all this morning, and I'm sorry that I couldn't stay and can't stay for the whole event, but I'm really happy to be here for a few minutes. Just wanted to share a little bit about my background and why I'm chair of the Aging Committee, which I think, many people sometimes are puzzled by when they see me. But I was a caregiver for my mother for 8 years. She had Alzheimer's disease, and that was really my sort of entree into public service. It's what propelled me into public service, because I was the only child of a single parent and found it to be incredibly difficult to find resources to figure out what we qualified for, to get, programming for my mother. And I was also really determined to keep her at home. I didn't want to institutionalize her, and it just became incredibly difficult. And I realized, if it's this difficult for us and we speak English as our first language, and she has a younger person in the house to advocate for her, I can only imagine how much more difficult it must be for folks who don't speak English as their first language, who don't have somebody younger in the household to advocate for them, and then who don't have the time and the resources to surf the web and make the calls and be on hold for hours on end. And that's really what propelled me into public service. And so I'm honored to be chair of the Aging Committee, and really deeply committed to ensuring that New York City is the best place for us to all grow older in. If we're lucky, I always say if we're lucky, then we'll all grow older here, and live long lives. And we know that most people, the majority of people, want to stay at home. They want to be in a place that's most familiar to them, that's safe to them. And I think we just need to do a whole lot more to ensure that that's possible. We know that, based on population changes, by 2040, we'll have a 25% increase in older adults compared to only a 3% increase in the general population. And we're simply not doing enough to date, to prepare the city or the state, for that matter, for the growing population. And so, I want to make sure that we're focusing on older adults, that we're also supporting paid and unpaid caregivers. I know the senator has been talking about that and supportive of some of those efforts. But we need to also create communities that are responsive to older adults. All of New York City will be a NORC, a naturally occurring retirement community, in just a few years. And so we need to make sure that we have the resources and the services, that we're investing in the organizations that are providing, meals to older adults so nobody goes hungry, but also culturally relevant meals, and programming that's culturally relevant to the needs of so many of our immigrant older adults. We need to make sure we're ending the mistreatment of older adults, and not just ageism and elder abuse, but also real estate predatory practices that disproportionately impact, older New Yorkers. And I also look forward to working with partners to make sure that we're bringing everybody into the 21st century, that everybody has the devices and the access to Wi-Fi and broadband that they need in order to stay connected to loved ones and neighbors and friends. That's just some of the priorities that we'll be working on at the city level here in the council, and particularly with the Aging Committee. I'm happy to answer any questions that folks have.
Thank you so much. And I know that you're on a timeline, so we're going to urge people, if you have questions specifically for Crystal, put them into Q&A and my staff will try to get them to me so we can address them to her before she leaves.
Thank you.
I want to highlight that many of you asked questions about a range of services for older adults. And so I'm including information about how to get my senior resource guide, which has numerous resources on aging in place and other vital services for older New Yorkers. And you can access the guide online. The link will be in the chat, or you can email my office, or you can call my office and we can mail you a copy of the guide. It's pretty big to download, so most people find it's better to have a actual copy of it. I also want to point out that many of you asked for a centralized place to get information about services for older adults. The New York City Department for the Aging has a number for the public to call, and then their staff pick up the phone and are very responsive. Their phone number is 212-244-6469, 212-244-6469, and that will also be listed in the chat. And remember, we'll send you everything if you've registered for this website today. And we're going to now start to ask some questions. Let me just see if there are any that have come in specifically for Crystal while I was talking. Well, Crystal, the one I was answering when you came on was, do you have an opinion about the city's proposal to move retirees from the city from the employee package they have to a Medicare Advantage program? Have the council talked about that at all?
I think we've heard from a lot of constituents about that. I don't know that there's been any formal conversation at the council level, but I've heard from a lot of constituents who are concerned about that. So we're talking to the unions to get further details and clarification, and see what the impact, might be, and see where things might land, and if there's room for changing, I guess, the course of action. Great,
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So you actually mentioned sort of the city becoming, a world of NORCs. Does the city, as far as you know, have any plans to actually create NORC type networks around the city?
Well, I think part of the problem or the challenge is that we're not doing that. We're not thinking about that. And we're frankly just not, creating communities that are age friendly, or aging friendly, or friendly to older adults. And so, that's certainly one of the many things that I'm pushing for, to make sure that not only do we have the providers to, provide the services to NORCs, but that also, these NORCs are connected to one another. And like I said, all of New York City will be a NORC in just a few years. So we need to make sure that we're doing more to ensure that, people can stay in touch with one another, that organizations and providers are in touch with one another, that people can move, and adjust and pivot quickly. We've seen obviously a lot of nonprofit organizations and providers pivot during the pandemic, change the way they provide their services. And so we need to make sure that, folks are even further along in the ability to pivot and adjust and make changes as needed, depending on, what might be going on.
Thank you. So I'm going to invite all of our guests to turn their pictures and mutes off, so that I'm just going to open this up to questions, and whoever thinks they are the right person to answer to jump in. And unfortunately, Crystal wasn't here for the presentations, but we'll get her all the materials. So a couple of questions involve frustration that our senior centers are offering outdated programming. Somebody referred to them as being in the dark ages and treating people like they're in kindergarten, and not really being prepared for the population of people coming to them in the 21st century. Do any of you know of programs or discussions working on modernizing and upgrading services at our senior centers?
I can say again, I wish we had plans to upgrade and modernize our senior centers. We don't, and we need to. There are some really great newer older adult centers. One that's in my district that also serves the LGBTQ community in particular is a Sage Center. That's amazing. It's brand new. I think all senior centers should look like that one. They've got, great programming, and, the place just looks great. It's nice to be in, people want to be there, and it's open to everyone. So it's LGBTQ friendly, but it's open to anyone. You don't have to be LGBTQ identified to partake in the services there. And, we shouldn't have senior centers that have leaky roofs. I've actually started a tour going to all senior centers. So if there are any places that folks, would like to have me at, please let me know. But I started my tour in Harlem, and, we saw one center that was newly renovated that, again, like looked amazing, was great. People were excited to be there. And then the next one we went to had leaky roofs. The kitchen didn't work. Just everything is incredibly old, out of date, and not working. And we, seniors deserve better than that. And we shouldn't have centers that, haven't been touched in 30, 40 years. So we need to actually invest in that. But the DFTA has one of the smallest capital budgets of all city agencies. So, this is about, from my perspective, this is about, values and priorities, and what we're saying about, who and what we value and who and what we don't value. And, the fact that DFTA has as small of a budget as it does on the capital, both capital and expense sides, really says a lot about how we think about and, our seniors and how we treat our seniors here in the city.
Great. And I'd like to, yes, go ahead.
Oh yeah, if I could just hop in on that and build off of what Councilmember Hudson was mentioning. It's a great question, because this is an issue that's beyond just New York City. This is a national issue of kind of getting senior centers across the country up to date. It's a rapidly changing culture. And so the National Council on Aging, through a grant from the Administration for Community Living, they have a new project that, great timing for this question. It opened in maybe February or March of this year. It's called the Modernizing Senior Centers Resource Center. So it's a project geared towards exactly that, finding ways to modernize a very out-of-date system and to better meet the needs of older adults in just more updated ways to kind of match a lot of the new technologies that have unfolded. You know, finding ways to support senior centers, older adult centers across the country in kind of getting, just improving their, the ways that they use technology to keep things relevant. It's a very, very rapidly changing scene. So I can plug that into the chat. There's a link to the National Council on Aging, this new piece that they're working on.
Thank you. I know that I have both the Burden Center for Aging and Lenox Hill Neighborhood House Senior Centers, multiple ones in and near my district, and they're doing some very innovative new things. So I certainly encourage people to check out both of those organizations for the different services they're offering. A question that came in through chat, and I'm not aware of this, is that while the public libraries were offering free Wi-Fi for seniors, they are now only offering them for children. And I have to say, I don't even get it. If you're having Wi-Fi service in a library, there's no cost difference between whether you have it available for one set of people using your library versus another. So we may have to double check if that is an across the board issue or something unique to one library. But has anybody else heard of that? Cutting off Wi-Fi, free Wi-Fi for seniors? No. Okay, we'll have to check into that because I think we all understand that the importance of Wi-Fi in a digital world is an obvious, and we want to try to maximize access to Wi-Fi for all New York City residents, in my opinion. Regardless of your age, there are real values to it for everyone. Okay. All right. My healthcare proxy lives in Massachusetts, but I live in Manhattan. Is there some way she can help me in administering my care when she cannot come down to New York City to do it herself? I don't know if anyone on this call, on this Zoom, feels like they're sort of in the legal side of the questions.
I don't have the specific answer to that, but I know that we have worked with several different partners in this area, and so I'm happy to kind of gather some resources that might be helpful to this question and follow up with your team afterwards, if that's helpful. Because I assume that that's a question that many people have, and it's a great question. So I'm happy to do some follow up from our end.
Great, thank you. And Alden, you're raising your hand.
Yeah. I wanted just to add, this is from my own experience being having that healthcare proxy. As long as the doctors in the hospital have proof that you are the proxy, then they will talk to you. So you don't have to be there, but they have to know that you're assigned.
And I will just put in a plug on that topic that it's always good to, if you have a healthcare proxy form, to check it, to update it if need be, because very few Americans even have a healthcare proxy form. And if people do, they often filled it out 10 years ago and details may have changed. So if you do have one, just to kind of check and make sure the right people have it and that the information is still correct.
And I know that my office has sponsored recently a Zoom on healthcare proxies and the relevant documents that you should be preparing for yourself. And so I think that that's also available through my websites, and maybe one of my staff will put something up on chat. Oh, there they already did as I was speaking. Advanced Planning Healthcare Proxies and Living Wills. And that event also had its own resource list, so it's quite possible there's an expert listed there that might be able to clarify that. And Alden, many people are asking, is there a master list of these villages like the Lenox Hill Village, the Carnegie Hill
Village? Yes, there is. There's something called the Village to Village Network. and just go online. It was started originally because of Beacon Hill Village helped start it. There are over 400 of these villages in the United States, and there are many around the world. And it's a great resource. And so you can identify where there is a village, and there will be one, I'm sure.
That's great. Thank you. Okay, so planning. If I'm contemplating a relocation to facilitate a more successful aging in place experience, for example, considering Florida for downgrading to a smaller, more affordable New York City apartment, and I'm just retiring, and I'm active and healthy and single now, what do you think is the ideal juncture timeline to begin planning for a relocation? Any hints or suggestions? I know often people talk about that they waited too long and that they no longer feel in a position to handle all of the production of moving and downsizing and looking for a new place. But I don't know that anyone has set up a specific time frame. Anyone?
I mean, I'll just say there are so many factors that go into making that kind of decision: familial, financial, geographic, and professional, many others. I think one place that I would start, if you have a financial planner, that is one place to start to at least kind of understand the different potential options of if you own your home, selling it, if you're renting, what that means, if you're thinking about buying an entrance fee into a retirement community or a 55 plus community, if it makes sense to just downsize and rent a smaller home. There are so many options. So I would perhaps start there if you happen to have a financial planner. There are also geriatric care managers that can kind of help think through different options. Sometimes geriatric care managers typically are kind of a private pay model, so that's not always available to everyone. But there are certainly professionals out there to help people think through different options.
I will tell you that my office gets huge numbers of calls from people where the stuff has just taken over their lives and their homes. And we even have a handbook on hoarding and what to do about it. But even if you don't think you're a hoarder, you get to be over 30 years old and you've started to pile up more things than you actually know what to do with. I can't emphasize enough, if you are feeling healthy and strong, it is time to take a look and say, how much stuff do I have that I don't need? And can I be moving it out? That you're never actually too young to start that assignment. I actually begged my parents for 20 years to do this. They didn't. We all paid a price for it.
Yep.
So I definitely would make the case that you really need to think about decluttering your life of stuff if you're thinking through it all, downsizing or even relocating, because you will have to confront that reality at some point.
And I think you said it well, that I used to work at a retirement community, and I would often talk to families about when is the right time to move. And I often encouraged the older adults that were thinking about moving that it's actually a gift to your children and your loved ones. Because if you're doing the work now and you can choose which stuff to keep and which stuff to get rid of, then you're not leaving it to those that you will at some point leave behind. And there are also senior move managers that are people that can help with the actual kind of decluttering and moving process if and when you do decide to move and or downsize.
I would add to that, Senator Krueger, it's a great point. I'm in the process of helping my parents move from our childhood home of 50 plus years. So there's a lot of the decluttering. I also did want to raise, we're hearing a lot of concerns from nonprofits that are supporting their older adult clients, that especially because of COVID, these concerns have been exacerbated. So we're really trying to think through how to support the nonprofit, the case managers, the senior centers who are trying to support older adults in this area. So there's, we're looking at different trainings, we're looking at different ways to support the community. So more to follow, but it is a concern we've been hearing that has always been there, but then has been exacerbated because of COVID. So just a highlight on that, and something we're really taking a look at.
Great, thank you. There's several questions about home care and the cost of home care and your access to it for Medicaid. I think it's almost too technical to get into with this panel because none of us are necessarily Medicaid law experts, although we have had those kinds of forums. I will just emphasize that, yes, the goal is to try to make sure people can get the level of care they need to remain in their own home. But when people are asking about 24-hour home care is so hard, the answer is, unfortunately, right now we have an incredible shortage of home care workers. And so there are actually people being waitlisted for home care, even in emergency situations. And also when you look into 24-hour home care, the math is just so expensive as to become almost impossible to be covered. There are various forms of insurance that cover some level of home care, but frankly, all of them are wanting. And I do think that that issue is one of the giant issues that our society has yet to get our arms around. There are some proposals in Albany for guaranteed long-term care coverage, but they are not moving quickly because of the costs and the complications. So I think I'm not going to start to go through those individual questions. But there are also a series of questions on housing. Are there any plans to create middle income group housing for seniors, referring to people who do not qualify as low income housing, but in retirement no longer have enough income to stay in their current homes? I'll open it up to anyone on the call, on the Zoom.
I can just chime in for a second and say that I know de Blasio had a plan. I don't remember off the top of my head the exact number of units, but he had a goal for a number of units of senior housing, and the goal was not met. I don't know if this administration is creating a new goal or just trying to meet the old goal. But I know as far as HPD is concerned, we've been trying to push them to activate a lot of the senior affordable housing developments. And, affordable housing is obviously an elusive term, but not all of it is for, extremely or low income folks. Some of it is just, for anybody that might be on a fixed income of any sort or at any level. But we just haven't seen those buildings developed in the last several years. And there has been funding and there have been subsidies allocated for developing those buildings specifically. I believe, I want to say, and I don't want to misspeak, but I think I know for sure in my district, and I think in another district in the Bronx, there were some senior affordable housing that's already been slated for. Like, I know in my district exactly where it's supposed to be. And this has been years in the, in the making. And I haven't received an update, but I know that, they're not breaking ground anytime soon. And so I think we're just pushing to move those projects further along than they currently are.
Thank you, Crystal. And I will add that we always advise when people call into our office that you keep track of and make application through HPD for every new complex coming online through the HPD system. They are all an application and lottery. Once you do the application, you don't necessarily have to redo it over and over again. You have it. But in these lotteries, there are different categories of eligibility in each building, X number of units. If you're between X and Y income, X number of units. If you're on a slightly higher income, there's often a category for aged for older New Yorkers to be eligible for some number of the units. So we encourage people to just keep making application for anything that is opening up, because the lottery, it's possible that they will be chosen. And of course, they don't have to take the apartment if they are chosen, but it's a continuing opportunity to try to, almost keep in multiple lines for possible units. People ask us all the time, how many of those units are in my district in Manhattan? To be quite blunt, very few of them. But so you have to deal with the reality that when looking for a more affordable apartment for yourself, you may have to move a little farther afield, but still staying in the city of New York. And again, making the application and even being chosen through the lottery doesn't force you to take that apartment, but we strongly encourage people to do that, because if you don't make the applications, you're never going to get that opportunity. There's also a question here about, if you're a senior, can you relocate to a family member's home who can assist them? Yes, of course you can, but it also triggers for me something I should have mentioned under the home care question, that there is a program where you can, if you're eligible for home care assistance, you actually can have a family member or friend who becomes your home care assistant, and they get paid by the state. So you could actually be moving in with some family member, or vice versa. They're moving in with you, where they can actually receive some income through the state Medicaid program to become your provider, so it can provide financial assistance to you and the family member, and make it more realistic that they can be of assistance to you, or that even as a combined household, you can all make it together. So I want to just sort of plug that in right now. And probably someone from my staff can put something about the personal selected home care worker onto the chat site. I know they're pouring information onto the chat site.
Senator, can I add one more thing about housing?
Please. Yes.
And yes, and the CDPAT program that you're talking about
Yes.
is a hidden gem. And so I'm glad that you are sharing that information. And there are also, obviously there is a major lack of affordable and middle income housing targeted towards the older population, but there are some creative co-housing programs, such as the home sharing program that's administered by the New York Foundation for Senior Citizens, and they actually receive funding from DFTA on that. So that matches older adults that are living in apartments or homes and essentially are looking for roommates, when that can help both defray the costs and also to provide socialization. My grandmother benefited from that. She lived in the Bronx in the Kingsbridge section, and she was in her 80s, and she had a roommate who was in his 60s, and they lived together for, I think, 3 years, and it was a very kind of fruitful roommate-ship. So I can put that information in the chat as well, and hope that people at least consider that if you're able to continue living in your home and just need a little bit of financial and or kind of social support.
Great. And Elana, someone also just typed into chat, how do you find these senior move managers that can help you with decluttering that you were describing?
Great question. I will put, there's a National Association for Senior Move Managers, and you can plug in your zip code and find people near you. So I'll put both of those links in the chat.
Great.
Senator, could I also add to the housing conversation? I think it's a really great point about Housing Connect. There are different income levels for different buildings. So it's, we'd advise the same thing as being making sure to apply for not just the senior focused housing, but other housing. The other really critical thing about the advocacy around senior housing is the service component that is in some of these new senior housing buildings. So I think that's, an exciting piece of building new senior housing. But as the aging chair noted, and as we all know, these buildings will not go up overnight. So there's, there's many sides to housing preservation and keeping us all, again, the point of our discussion here today is keeping us all here and supporting us as we age in New York. I wanted to give another plug for the SPREE program, the rent freeze program. That is another critical piece to freezing rent and has a higher income threshold than many of the senior affordable housing lotteries. So I know that you field many calls about SPREE and have many resources, but the rent freeze program can be a critical piece to freezing rent for older New Yorkers at certain income levels, and it's higher than often the affordable housing.
Thank you for bringing that up. I can't believe I didn't think to bring that up. And yes, so if you live in rent regulated housing, and you're a senior, you want to double check whether you are eligible for the SCREE program, which we've now renamed the rent freeze program. And what it means is if you are eligible, your rent doesn't go up each year. The landlord gets paid, but they get paid by the city of New York through a property tax deduction, and you don't see an increase in your rent. And so it's a program that by and large landlords completely support because they're getting paid guaranteed through their reduction in taxes. And the city of New York, for very minimal cost, is helping ensure that your apartments do not become unaffordable to you because basically your rent is frozen at current level. And people who apply, even if you've been rejected once before, it doesn't mean there hasn't been a change in your income or the eligibility criteria since the last time you checked. So we strongly urge people to make the application and to find out whether they're eligible. And there's a very similar but not identical program called DREE for people with medical disabilities. So even if you are not a senior, if you suffer from some disability that defines you as eligible for SSI or SSD, and you'll know who you are if that's the case, you may be eligible for the same program or an equivalent program regardless of your age. So thank you. We cannot ever forget to talk about the value of that program. And most importantly, there's a huge number of New Yorkers who are eligible and who are not applying. And so we never get it. Like, oh my God, if they knew about this, they'd absolutely be making application. So, and it's not that complicated. You can get the application from my office. We can help walk you through it if you're confused by it. So please, everyone who thinks they might be eligible and they are living in rent-regulated housing, let's make sure we all check out our eligibility for that program as well. So we have a whole series of questions about safe streets, sidewalks, transportation. I will start out by just telling everybody we are planning a pedestrian safety event in July. So stay tuned for that for future. But we're getting questions about needing to do a better job of understanding the needs of older New Yorkers and others with sidewalks and crossing streets, and how do we get enforcement? And that is one of the true frustrations out there, that one, I just will say it out loud, we're living in a world, particularly here in Manhattan, where there's too many of us trying to fit on the head of a pin, which means our sidewalks are incredibly busy, our streets are incredibly busy, we have bikes lanes. We need to have bike lanes so that we are actually protecting the bikers and others from the bikes, but it means you have to be constantly vigilant. When you're going to step off a street corner onto the roadway, you have to look both ways, because you have to look, of course, in the pattern of traffic, but you also have to make sure that a bike hasn't decided to go the wrong way on the street as opposed to with traffic, so that you don't get surprised by being hit by a bike coming at you from the direction you didn't expect them to be. So you need to constantly check both directions before you step off of a sidewalk to cross the street. We also deal with the fact that the research shows that as we get older, we get a bit slower in our gait so that a younger person might be walking across the street at twice the speed that an older New Yorker is. So let's also be smart. And if there's 12 seconds left on the clock and it's a full avenue, you're not going to make it across First, Second, Third, Lexington Park in 12 seconds. So don't try. Wait till the next light's completed before you start that. Maybe park because you can make it to the middle and wait. But most avenues don't have a mid avenue concrete place to stand. So you also just have to think through, you don't necessarily jump out of the way of traffic as quickly as you might have when you were a teenager. So be much more careful. But yes, enforcement is a really tough issue because there are not police on every street corner, and they are actually told not to attempt to chase down bikes or even cars that perhaps nearly hit you. And really the goal is to try to make sure that no one's getting near you to hit you in the first place. So there are efforts to increase the number of cameras there are in the city of New York to track vehicles for both speeding and traveling through red lights. I'm a big supporter of expanding those. The documentation is that the more the more cameras there are, the less danger there is, and it does change people's behavior. They get a couple of these $50 tickets, because that's what they cost, and they decide, maybe I won't try to jump through that red light. Maybe I won't be speeding down the block. So the legislature is trying to move legislation that would expand the number of cameras we have. Also trying to expand buses having cameras so that they also can ticket those who are parking or stopping illegally in bus stops, which then triggers buses to have to pull out of the bus lanes, causing more risks along the streetways. So we're also trying that. But we do continue to hear, and I'm seeing a number of questions here, bikes who are roaring through red lights and what can be done to make them obey the rules. And that the local precinct said they should write to the mayor. I never opposed to people lobbying their elected officials. That's called advocacy, a topic of today. But we need to continually improve how we are both aware of what is going on in our streets and how we can come up with solutions that work for everybody.
I'd like to hop in on that. Just to share an example from one of the age-friendly neighborhood organizations that we worked quite closely with over the last 2 years, Good Neighbors of Park Slope. For this topic of kind of transportation, sidewalk safety, all of that traffic calming, they started a really innovative program where they work together. It's an intergenerational program where they work with like local school-aged kids to assess the street quality in their neighborhood. So they're going around, they're mapping out the sidewalks, uneven sidewalks, tree roots that are presenting hazards all over the neighborhood that might be, fall hazards, anything that's particularly dangerous or concerning for older adults. And the plan is to use this information, this data, in an increasingly data-driven world. This is a grassroots approach at gathering data to support some of their local advocacy at the community board level, to start saying, to reframe what they're doing as, instead of yelling and just being frustrated about what's going on, really zeroing in on exactly what the issue is. Oh, we know on Main Street, there's XYZ issues that could be addressed by Department of Transportation or whatever agency it is. This is just a great example of some of the grassroots ways that you can get involved rather than pulling your hair out. You can link up with your neighbors. You can join an age-friendly neighborhood organization and really drive solutions in really creative ways.
Thank you very much for that. That's a great idea. I'm looking, there's so many more questions and we're already at 11:25. So we're not actually going to even get to whole sections of questions that people asked. I have to say, I'm not sure we ever had as many questions submitted as we did for this event. All right, I'm just going to ask one more question because I want to make sure I at least touch base on that. Do any of you know about organizations who provide advocacy for seniors who feel they are being harassed either in their homes or otherwise in their community? I'm afraid not. But Wendy, I know you're there as a voice of God. Didn't we have a group that was working on senior harassment? I'm going to suggest whoever asked that question to follow up with my office.
I don't have a particular answer for that, but I do know that on June 15th is it's like International Elder Abuse Awareness Day or something like that. And I'm sure that there's an accompanying website for that cause. And usually those websites can provide a number of different resources to kind of, bring awareness to the issue, but then also hopefully provide some solutions. So I could look into that and follow up with Senator Krueger's office. And so any follow-up material might include some of that.
I just wanted, hi, it's Wendy. So I couldn't figure out how to unmute myself. The district attorney's office has an elder abuse hotline, and there is a hotline to call for the senator's district. Carter Burden has an elder abuse hotline. So, if you feel you or that you know of a loved one who's being harassed, definitely call. If you're a friend or a loved one who is witnessing this, and we'll send this out with the resources. The New York City Elder Abuse Coalition does have a helpline for friends and families, and we'll include that in the resources that we send out.
Great.
Wendy, that is great. There are those elder abuse service prevention and service providers in every borough as well. And so Carter Burden, as you mentioned, Senator, has some great resources. I know there's also some advocacy around, landlord anti-displacement work. Really, so I think talking to some of the nonprofits that do the elder abuse services and prevention work, like Carter Burden, is a great example. You can find those through the Department for the Aging website. I believe that I know Cooper Square Committee in Manhattan also does some great work. So those are a few other resources. But I think the Department for the Aging website will have some great information.
Excellent. So with that, we are actually completely out of time. I want to thank again Andrea, Elana, Alden, Mario, and Councilmember Crystal Hudson, who had to leave us. I want to remind everybody that next Thursday, May 26th, from 7 p.m. to 8:30 p.m., we will hold a virtual town hall with the Public Utility Law Project to discuss surging utility costs, explain how your utility bill is being calculated, and what your rights are as a utility customer. I want to thank everybody for joining me today. This was an excellent event, and I am sorry that we didn't have another hour for questions because we had another hour's worth of questions. So I hope everybody will have a great day. Thank you again. Bye.
Bye.